Welcome back to the KAHI Afternoon News. Good afternoon. I am Casey Freela. Pleased to be joined by Congressman Tom McClintock for our weekly conversation. And Tom, I just wanted to start. I was reading on your website your remarks that you delivered on the House floor in response to kind of what's been a firestorm on social media, people responding to President Trump's tweets. And I just want to talk a little bit about, the rhetoric compared to maybe the tone that he set with sending them, because it seems like you kind of gave a reasoned response in that, what he said, maybe the way he said it wasn't good, but he was just kind of pointing out some things that probably a lot of people that in our listening audience and a lot of Republican voters and just Americans in general might feel.
Well, basically, he was reprising that old slogan, "America, love it or leave it." That's not a new sentiment. It's not a radical sentiment. It is a reminder that we have built the greatest country in the world from solid principles that can be described ultimately in a single word: freedom, and that there is nothing that prevents anyone who doesn't like our country from leaving. And that's just true. That has nothing to do with whether you're born here, born abroad. As I pointed out in my statement, some of the most patriotic people I have ever met in my life have been born abroad, have come here because they loved America. They wanted to become Americans. They wanted to raise their kids as Americans. They obeyed all of our laws. They waited patiently in line. They did everything our country asked of them to do. And at the same time, some of the most unpatriotic Americans I know were born here, have enjoyed all the blessings of liberty, and have never appreciated it or even taken the time to understand why our country is so great and why it is so good.
You also pointed out, talking about socialism and slavery springing from the same principle, and this socialist lean, it's undeniable, it seems like, at least with some of the folks that you're having to work with basically on a daily business. I don't know. I don't want, I'm a middle-aged guy, okay? I'm in my early 40s. I feel like, I came up, look, America, the greatest country on earth. I'm very patriotic. I enjoy living here, and I've been blessed to be born in California, especially. But there is kind of this weird underlying, I don't know if it's a movement, but do you feel that when you're there trying to work and when you're getting feedback from different people that you basically have to do business with because it's part of your job?
I think everybody senses that events are moving more and more rapidly toward a crisis. And as I see it, Lincoln gave several remarkable speeches in 1858, 2 years before he was elected president. And in one of them, he literally made the point of the relationship between slavery and what we've now come to know as socialism. He said it's the same principle in whatever shape it develops itself. It's the same spirit that says, you work and toil and make bread, and I will eat it. That is the common principle from which both slavery and socialism spring. They're the two sides of the very same coin. And the other speech he gave that was so remarkable that year was his House Divided speech, where he said the agitation for slavery is not going to end until a crisis shall have been met and passed. And then he reminded us, a house divided against itself cannot stand. And he went on to say, I do not expect the house to fall, but I do expect that it will cease to be divided. It must become all one thing or all the other. He understood that you could hold freedom and slavery together in this very uneasy, unstable, temporary accommodation for a few decades. But ultimately, we had to become all one thing or all the other, because ultimately those two principles cannot coexist. They're exact opposites. They're antithetical. And I think that maybe that wheel has come full circle, and today it is freedom and slavery that have been held, or freedom and socialism that have been held in an uneasy, unstable coalition for the last 50 years or so in this country, and ultimately they can't be reconciled. And that's why you're seeing this growing, increasing agitation for socialism, and why things are now becoming so impassioned, so what's the word I'm looking for? Unstable.
I think, and the term keyboard warriors have been around for a while, but just to look at some of the hatred that I see online. I mean, I have to be honest, I didn't get into the media to be a Twitter guy or to be a Facebook guy. I mean, I enjoy covering stories and news and things that affect our community. That's why I work at a station like this. It just feels like, and I just want your opinion, it's so poisonous out there. I mean, if I even post something that I'm going to have you on in an interview, I'm going to have a bunch of people who don't even have, whatever they call it, avatars. They basically have eggs as their pictures, who are going to come on and trash anything that we try and say, despite the fact that you've won by an overwhelming majority every single time that you've ran up here for Congress. It just feels so poisonous, and I don't know if there's any putting the genie back in the bottle. It saddens me, I guess, is the point that I'm trying to make here, and I just don't know where we go from here, because the ability to just talk to each other seems like it's completely gone out the door, because I can just pop on my phone and put whatever nonsense I want on the internet.
And we're seeing that across the country, and again, I think it stems from perhaps the fact that Lincoln was right, that the agitation for socialism now will continue until a crisis shall have been met and passed. It may be that crisis is the 2020 election, but at some point the American people are going to have to decide which road they want to go down, because you ultimately can't go down both.
We're visiting with Congressman Tom McClintock here on KAHI. Tom, let's change gears. I want to talk a little bit about raising the U.S. debt limit to avoid a potential default. Today, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said she'd like to vote on a bill to hike the debt ceiling by July 26, which is the chamber's last day of activity before the August recess, hoping that it would give the Senate enough time to pass legislation before it leaves the following week. You know, in the many years that you and I have talked on this program, we've had to address this. Is anything different? I mean, what is happening right now with that, and do you foresee that vote being able to come through before the recess?
Well, in a sense it has to, because that is the only way you can maintain. When you're spending $1 trillion more a year than you're taking in, you're going to be running up $1 trillion annual debt. And if you don't raise the debt limit, you cannot then service that debt. And that causes what's called a sovereign debt crisis, where markets simply stop loaning you money. It's like, if you don't pay your credit cards on time, you're going to find two things happen. Number one, they're going to cut off your credit cards. And number two, it's going to cost you a tremendous amount more to borrow in the future. Countries are exactly the same way. And without an increase in the debt limit, we run that, not just risk, we run that certainty. And that would be something that would be very, very harmful to the country. But the other thing that would be almost as harmful to the country is to continue this deficit spending. $1 trillion is $8,000 for every family in this country. That is debt that is added to your family's obligations, just as surely as if it appeared on your credit card statement. You're required to pay that back through your future taxes. That's just 1 year's deficit spending, which means that our kids and our grandkids are going to not only have to pay for their own needs, they're going to have to repay all of the money that we borrowed, and that robs the future of economic growth. And so it's got to be brought under control. And the reason we have a debt limit that has to be raised by a vote of the Congress is because it's supposed to then trigger an evaluation. If we're running further in debt, we've got to do what any family would do. Sit down and say, okay, this is not sustainable. We're going to have to start making some changes here. Here's what we need to cut. Here's what we can do without. Here's how we get things back under control. We're not doing that anymore. We haven't for years. We simply raise the debt limit every time we reach it without making any reforms, and that is going to be very dangerous going forward. Right now, borrowing costs for the government are extremely low, so nobody's particularly worried about it. But the seductive thing about that is, as interest rates start to creep up, as they do, the amount of principal and interest that we have to pay skyrockets. We're already paying about $350 billion a year just as interest on the money we've already borrowed. But you have a slight increase in interest costs, you'll have a major increase in the debt service, and that in turn could run us bankrupt very quickly. In fact, within a few year time on the current path we're on, they estimate that we'll be spending more in interest payments than we do for the entire national defense of the country. At that point, it becomes unsustainable.
I mean, that is it's a hard truth. I don't know. Again, this is why we talk about it, because I don't know that you're hearing that, especially just on regular network television news. But this isn't, again, it's not something that's way down the line. It would even be great if we could think, okay, well, maybe it would be our grandkids that have to deal with this. I mean, not that that's fair, but this is something that could come to light very, very, very soon, because as you mentioned, that it's just a fact of numbers.
Right. We don't know. The one thing I've asked all the finance people who come through here is, well, when do you think we run the risk of a debt spiral and a sovereign debt crisis? And the debt spiral happens when markets get a little leery about your ability to pay back on time, or your willingness to pay back on time, so they raise the interest rate a little. That causes your interest payments to skyrocket. As your interest payments skyrocket, you become less credit worthy. They have to raise interest rates a little bit more to cover their additional risk, and it begins this negative feedback loop that ends in a sovereign debt crisis where markets simply back off. Nobody knows exactly when that's going to happen. It depends on a lot of things. It could be triggered by, I don't know, a famine in South America. Who knows? Mm-hmm. But if there's but what they do have all told me is, you get up close to $1 trillion a year annual deficit, you are creating unstable conditions that could lead to that. And where are we right now? We're approaching $1 trillion deficit.
We've been visiting with Congressman Tom McClintock here on KAHI. Tom, as always, thank you so much for your time, and we'll look forward to talking again soon.
My pleasure, Casey. Thanks for having me.
We'll take a quick break and be right back.